What if most of what you've been taught about discipline is incorrect? You've been told that discipline depends on willpower, that you need to push yourself, that you must constantly resist your own desires, and that discipline is meant to feel difficult. But there's something rarely explained. The most disciplined people in history were not constantly fighting themselves. They did not depend on willpower. They did not wake up every day locked in an exhausting internal struggle. Instead, they found a different approach, one that made discipline feel as natural as breathing. Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary samurai who won more than 60 duels to the death, trained consistently throughout his life. He rose before sunrise. He practiced sword techniques for hours. He meditated. He created art. He wrote philosophy. He never stopped refining himself. And yet, there is no record of Musashi struggling with motivation. No evidence suggests he was at odds with himself. There is no indication that he had to force discipline through sheer effort. Why? Because Musashi understood something fundamental about human nature, something modern research is only now beginning to support. He discovered what I call the flow system. It's a method that changes discipline from a daily struggle into a steady current that moves you forward. Today, you'll learn how this system works. And once you understand it, you'll see that the discipline you've been pursuing, the discipline that always felt just beyond reach, was never meant to feel like a constant fight. Before we continue, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment below. Which area of your life do you find hardest to stay disciplined in? I read every comment, and your input helps guide future content. Now, back to the video. Chapter 1. The Exhausted Warrior. The story I'm about to share involves a young man named Kenji. Kenji was 26 years old and worked as an engineer in Osaka. On the surface, his life appeared successful. He had a stable job, a solid income, and a promising future. But internally, Kenji was constantly struggling with himself. Every morning, his alarm went off at 5 a.m. He had committed to waking early, exercising, reading, meditating, all the habits commonly associated with success. And each morning, the same conflict began. His body wanted to stay in bed. His mind started bargaining. Just 10 more minutes. You worked late yesterday. Missing one day won't change anything. You can restart on Monday. Occasionally, willpower won. He would force himself out of bed, push through a workout, and already feel drained before the day had truly begun. More often, willpower failed. He would hit snooze, wake up late, skip exercise, and carry guilt with him for the rest of the day. This pattern showed up everywhere: eating well, studying for certifications, building his side business. Every positive habit required resistance. Every day consumed his mental energy before he could apply it to anything meaningful. Kenji read countless books on discipline. He tried every strategy: habit stacking, temptation bundling, accountability partners, and apps that track streaks. Nothing worked for long. Motivation would rise for a week, maybe music too, then collapse. Kenji would end up back at the beginning, more tired and more discouraged than before. One evening, after another failed attempt at his morning routine, Kenji sat alone in a small park near his apartment. He felt tired, not physically, but on a deeper level. Tired of constantly opposing himself. That's when he noticed an elderly man practicing sword forms at the edge of the park. The man moved slowly and with purpose. Each motion flowed naturally into the next, like water moving downstream. His face showed no strain. There was no visible effort, only smooth and continuous movement. Kenji watched for 20 minutes. The old man never stopped, never paused, and showed no signs of fatigue. When the practice ended, Kenji approached him. "Excuse me, sir. I watched you practice for a long time. You moved continuously. Aren't you tired?" The old man smiled. "Tired? Why would I be tired? I wasn't doing anything." Kenji looked confused. "But you were practicing sword forms for 20 minutes straight." "My body was moving," the man replied, "but I wasn't opposing it." There is no exhaustion when there is no resistance. These words struck Kenji immediately. No exhaustion when there is no resistance. He realized he had been fighting himself every day. It explained why he always felt drained. "Can you teach me?" Kenji asked. "I struggle with discipline. Everything feels like a conflict." The old man studied him for a moment, then said, "Come to this park tomorrow at 5 a.m. If you arrive, I'll show you what Musashi understood. If you don't look for me again." Chapter 2. The First Principle. Stop Resisting. Kenji arrived at 4:45 a.m. He hadn't slept well. The familiar internal negotiations played through his thoughts all night, but something about the old man's words had cut through the usual excuses. The old man was already there, sitting quietly. "You came," he said. "Good. Sit." Kenji sat on the cold ground. "Tell me," the old man said, "when you try to be disciplined, what happens inside you?" Kenji considered the question. "It feels like I'm divided. One part of me wants to do what's right. Another part wants comfort. They oppose each other. And which side usually wins?" "The part that seeks comfort, eventually." The old man nodded. "That is why you fail. You've created a conflict within yourself. And in conflict, both sides lose. Even when the disciplined part wins, it costs energy. That's why discipline feels draining." He picked up a stick and drew in the dirt, 2 arrows pointing at each other. "This is you. Force against force. Willpower against desire. The same struggle every day. Every day, you lose energy whether you succeed or fail." Kenji stared at the arrows. They reflected exactly how he felt. "Now," the old man continued, "let me show you what Musashi understood." He wiped away the arrows and drew a single line, flowing like a river. Musashi did not oppose himself. He did not rely on willpower to defeat desire. He aligned discipline and desire into one direction. He removed the conflict entirely. "How is that possible?" Kenji asked. "By understanding why resistance appears in the first place." Resistance is not a flaw. It is a form of intelligence. Your mind and body push back against what feels unsafe, unfamiliar, or meaningless. They are attempting to protect you. Kenji frowned. "So my laziness is protection?" "What you call laziness is your system saying, 'This music doesn't feel safe,' or 'This doesn't feel like who I am.' When you force discipline through willpower, you override that protective system. It works briefly, but your system responds. It always wins in the end because it never rests." The old man stood. Musashi's approach was different. Instead of overpowering the system, you cooperate with it. You make discipline feel safe. You make it feel aligned with who you are. When that happens, resistance fades, and discipline becomes natural. Chapter 3. The Flow System. Over the following weeks, the old man taught Kenji what he called the flow system. 5 principles that transform discipline from conflict into movement. Principle 1. Make it inevitable. Your problem, the old man explained, is that every morning you decide whether to be disciplined. Decision requires energy. Decision creates space for resistance. He described Musashi's daily routine. Musashi did not choose to train. Training simply followed waking up. There was no decision involved. No pause where resistance could appear. Remove the choice entirely. Don't wake up and decide to exercise. Wake up and exercise before your mind realizes there was ever an option. Kenji reorganized his mornings. He slept in his workout clothes. His shoes were placed beside the bed. The moment his feet touched the floor, he was already moving. There was no opening for resistance. Within a week, the internal struggle disappeared, not because Kenji had stronger willpower, but because there was nothing left to argue with. Principle 2. Make it small. Musashi practiced sword forms for hours, but he did not begin that way. He started with a single form, then another. The hours were built from minutes. The old man explained that resistance increases as tasks grow larger. When Kenji imagined a full hour-long workout, his system sensed a threat. When he imagined 5 minutes, it saw nothing worth opposing. Start so small that resistance cannot locate you. 5 push-ups. 1 page. 2 minutes of stillness. Your system does not resist what feels harmless. Kenji simplified everything. His once ambitious routine became almost too easy. 5 minutes of movement, 1 paragraph of reading, 60 seconds of quiet. And something unexpected happened. Without resistance blocking him, he often continued. The 5 minutes became 15. Music. The paragraph became a chapter, not because he pushed himself, but because momentum took over once resistance stepped aside. Principle 3. Make it identity. This is the deepest principle, the old man said. Musashi did not have discipline. Music. He was disciplined. Practice was not something he did. It was who he was. He explained that people do not resist actions that align with their identity. A musician does not force themselves to play music. A reader does not struggle to read. The behavior flows naturally from who they are. You keep saying, "I need to become disciplined." This creates distance. Discipline becomes something external, something to chase or fight toward. Instead, he said, state who you are. Not, "I want to exercise," but "I am someone who moves daily." Not, "I should read more," but "I am a reader." When identity changes, behavior follows without pressure. Kenji began speaking differently and thinking differently. He stopped saying he was trying to build habits. He started saying, "This is simply what I do. This is who I am." The change was subtle, yet powerful. Resistance fades when you are not forcing yourself to become someone new, but acting as who you already are. Principle 4. Make it enjoyable. Musashi did not endure his training. He enjoyed it. The sword was his craft, his meditation, his satisfaction. That is why he could practice endlessly without burnout. The old man warned Kenji about the danger of discipline for discipline's sake. Forcing yourself to do activities you dislike, in ways you dislike, creates resentment. Resentment creates resistance. Resistance leads to exhaustion. Find the version of discipline you can enjoy. If you hate running, don't run. Walk, swim, dance. The movement matters more than the method. Kenji realized he had been pushing himself through workouts he disliked simply because they were considered optimal. He replaced them with activities he genuinely enjoyed. The discipline stayed. The discomfort vanished. Principle 5. Make it sacred. Finally, the old man explained that Musashi treated his practice as sacred, not in a religious sense, but sacred as something set apart, protected, and respected. When something is sacred, you do not negotiate with it. You do not skip it because you are tired. You do not bargain with it when something else appears. It exists beyond excuses. Your practice must become untouchable, not through force, but through respect. You protect it because it matters. You honor it because it shapes who you are becoming. Kenji began approaching his morning practice differently, not as a task to complete, but as a meeting with his future self. Something worthy of protection. Something he would not, trade for convenience. Chapter 4. The Transformation. 3 months passed. Kenji was no longer the same. Not only physically, although that had changed as well. Something deeper had shifted. He woke at 5 a.m. without an alarm. His body rose naturally because that was its pattern. There was no negotiation, no struggle, no exhausting inner debate. He moved through his morning practice like water. Exercise flowed into reading, flowed into meditation. No resistance, no force, only steady movement. Colleagues at work noticed. "You seem different," one said. "Calmer, but also more focused. How do you do it?" Kenji struggled to explain that he wasn't actively doing anything. The discipline was moving through him, not being imposed by him. The current was carrying him forward. One evening, he returned to the park. The old man was there, practicing his sword forms. "You've learned," the old man said without turning. "I think I'm starting to understand." "Then tell me." Kenji gathered his thoughts. Discipline isn't about force. It's about flow. When you fight yourself, you lose. Even when you think you've won. When the conflict is removed, discipline becomes natural. The old man smiled. Musashi won more than 60 duels. But his greatest victory was one no one witnessed, the victory over his own resistance. He didn't conquer it through force. He resolved it through understanding. He turned toward Kenji. Most people spend their lives in conflict with themselves. They believe this is normal. They believe discipline must involve pain. They don't realize there is another option. The flow system. Kenji said, "The flow system. Make it inevitable. Make it small. Make it identity. Make it enjoyable. Make it sacred. Follow these principles, and you stop fighting yourself. Chapter 5. The Science Behind the System. Modern neuroscience supports what Musashi understood centuries ago. Willpower is limited. Studies from Case Western Reserve University show that self-control functions like a battery. Each decision you make, each urge you resist, drains that reserve. Over time, less willpower remains. This explains why discipline based on force eventually fails. You are trying to power your entire life with a resource that weakens with use. The flow system works differently. When behavior becomes automatic, it bypasses the prefrontal cortex entirely. Control shifts to the basal ganglia. This region manages habits without consuming conscious energy. This is why Kenji's morning practice felt effortless. It wasn't because he gained extraordinary willpower. His routine had moved from conscious effort into automatic behavior. The battery was no longer required. Research on identity-based behavior change reinforces this idea. A study published in the European Journal of Social Psychology found that individuals who identify as exercisers, rather than people trying to exercise, maintain habits far longer and with significantly less perceived effort. When actions align with identity, there is no internal resistance. You are not forcing unfamiliar behavior. You are expressing who you are. The principle of enjoyment also has scientific support. Activities that release dopamine reinforce themselves. You do not need willpower to repeat what feels rewarding. By choosing enjoyable forms of disciplined behavior, you engage your brain's reward system as a partner rather than opposing it. Chapter 6. Your Path Forward. Here is the core truth. Discipline was never meant to be a battle. The struggle you've experienced is not evidence of weakness. It's evidence of an ineffective method. Musashi did not possess more willpower than you. He had a different relationship with action. The flow system is simple, but it requires letting go of what you've been taught about forcing yourself, fighting yourself, and overcoming yourself. You do not need to overcome yourself. You need alignment. Make discipline inevitable by removing decision points. Make it small enough that resistance cannot detect it. Make it identity by declaring who you are, not who you hope to become. Make it enjoyable so your mind supports you instead of resisting you. Make it sacred so it becomes protected and non-negotiable. Do these things and the conflict ends. Not because you won, but because you stopped fighting. And in that calm, you'll discover something important. The discipline you searched for was never avoiding you. It was waiting for you to stop struggling, to stop forcing, and to allow it to move naturally. Musashi's true secret was never the sword. It was the quiet within him, the absence of conflict, the state of flow. Now it's your turn. If this video helped you see discipline differently, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications for future content. Let me know in the comments which principle resonated most with you. Make it inevitable, make it identity, or make it sacred. Remember, discipline that feels like warfare is discipline that will eventually fail. But discipline that flows, that becomes part of who you are, that kind of discipline does not run out, because you cannot exhaust what you are no longer fighting. If you've watched this far, thank you for your attention. You've already demonstrated a level of focus many people struggle to maintain. Now stop fighting yourself. Start flowing. See you in the next video.